Indeed, indeed, indeed. It's another fabulous Friday here at the Psychic Funhouse. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will be your hosts tonight for an exciting hour of spiritual discussion and psychic readings and all things in between. My name is Lawrence Birch, and I'm joined here tonight with my lovely co-host, the amazing Adrian Stratton. So welcome, Adrian.
Oh, hey, Lawrence. Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. And here we are at the Psychic Fun House, which is one of my favorite places to be on a Friday evening. And looking forward to getting into it tonight. So
Yeah,
let's do it. Let's
yeah,
do it.
yeah. We should mention before we get started that the Psychic Funhouse is for entertainment purposes only,
Ah,
and we
yes.
don't offer medical advice, financial advice, legal advice, any advice that you should take and do something with, because that's not our area of expertise. We're just psychics here
Yeah.
to have a good time and to help you get through the day, maybe through the weekend, maybe even through the month if we're lucky. So
Yeah.
that's what we're all about. Um, and we do also offer private readings and healings, and maybe Adrian could let you know how to contact her so you can take advantage of that after the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Best way to learn more about my services and fees is to check out my website, which is ravenmessages.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Raven Messages. And yeah, I see people privately, Zoom and telephone calls. And I'd love to help with any of the services that I provide. I am a psychic and a medium, and so yeah, that's it. How about you, Lawrence?
Well, I was just going to say before I share my info, if you have any events coming up that people need to know about or anything happening
Oh, I'm so
that
glad
you
you
think,
asked.
yeah,
Yeah, actually, this Sunday at the Sanctuary and Wellness Yoga Studio in Tustin between the hours of 11 and 3 p.m. I will be there providing tarot card readings, and there's a small entrance fee. I think it's $20, I think, something like that.
right.
And a few different kinds of vendors and readers, healers will be there, and it's a very nice space and very, very nice people. So I've got that coming up, as well as next Saturday, the Holistic Fair at the Laguna Wellness Center. Yeah, and
Oop, date's different though. I gotta fix the date.
yeah, the 26th.
Yeah.
What is it? Oh, goodness. What
Uh-oh.
is the date? It's, uh, geez, let's see here. I can tell you in a second.
Hmm.
That's gonna be the 24th, May the 24th, from 11 until 5 p.m. in Laguna Woods. And there's a lot of free things that are happening at this particular holistic fair. Free lectures, various vendors, and people providing readings and healings. And I think there's a couple of astrologers there as well. So it's a great day.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you for letting me share that.
Absolutely, yeah. I hear there's somebody there brings pretty delicious tamales sometimes too.
That's
I really
right.
like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
very cool. Very cool, very cool. All right. Well, thank you for sharing all that. Hopefully our listeners and watchers will be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
So, my contact information.
Yes, please.
Yes. So, um, you can reach me at 541 344-7534. My email is givingtree@earthlink.net. My website, givingtreefarm.com. And I have a Facebook page, Giving Tree Farm Herb Company. So plenty of options for you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. So, while we were in the green room before going live tonight, we were discussing a variety of different things. And one of the things I brought up was the human potential movement, which, for those of you that are younger than we are, which may be the majority of you, you may not have heard of that term before, or maybe you heard it passed around by your elders or whatnot. But the human potential movement kind of arose out of the 60s and really the 70s as a way to challenge people's conventional thinking in order to get them to exceed their self-imposed boundaries and limits. Um, Basically, it was a way to grow and evolve, oftentimes with a spiritual bent or intention behind it, and with varying degrees of success. Uh, some of the movements devolved or started off, as cults. And Synanon is
Yep.
one of the more famous ones. There's a really great documentary, actually a few documentaries about Synanon and what happened with that. Synanon was a group that started in Santa Monica, and these days we take for granted, although it's still not common enough to really address the needs out there. That people who have substance abuse issues, addiction issues, uh, they have a disease and they need to be addressed that way. Back in the day, especially in the 50s and early 60s, this wasn't really well understood or accepted, and people that had, at that time was mostly alcohol or heroin addictions, were really looked down on and rejected by society. And they didn't have any place to really go to get their issues addressed that were contributing to or causing the underlying addiction in the first place. Synanon was actually one of the first places that uh, took people in, um, and tried to give them food and shelter, as well as some directed therapy to help them address and overcome their addictive problems. And for a while, it was incredibly successful. Um, they had a huge building on Santa Monica Beach, and people would come from all over the country and eventually outside the U.S. and they started forming different kinds of groups to support people, and they got politicians involved, and they got donations from the community, and you know, and as often happens, things were going so well that somebody decided it was time for a power trip, and the leader of the Synanon decided that it wasn't enough that people were getting help. He needed to have some of the attention and energy directed at himself. And so that's when things start to get a little weird, like Jim Jones and the infamous Kool-Aid situation. Anyway, long story short, they moved up to the Bay Area in San Francisco, and then turned into kind of a quasi-military situation where they were brainwashing people, and separating parents from their children and brainwashing the kids. And oh yeah, they put a rattlesnake that they cut the rattles off of into one of the attorneys who was going after them's mailbox, so that when he opened it up, he didn't hear it and it bit him. He survived, fortunately, but Synanon did not. So,
Yeah, that's
um,
right.
yeah. But anyway, and that's just one example of how things can get sideways in a hurry when, people don't follow their original teachings and start to, you know, get power hungry. But it's, fascinating to look at from a distance. So, do you know anybody who went to Synanon? I know that name rings a bell for you, but
Yeah, it does. I I don't I don't know of anybody that went to Synanon well, I shouldn't say that. I know that I have met people years ago that went through Synanon. Yeah, but more recently, I've known people that have gone to some of the facilities that are kind of like a spin-off of the Synanon program and utilized a lot of the same techniques. So it was no joke. Very, very, I don't know. I will say from the stories that I heard, I would say abusive, really
Yeah.
abusive programming and techniques. And, the idea was to break people down and then rebuild them. Uh, you know, and if that wasn't bad enough, it was like, well, who's doing the rebuilding? And it's like, so yeah.
Yep. That's about it. Yep. Yeah. I think people are always looking for um, advice, right?
Yes.
And you know, it's part of the human condition to never be satisfied, which is a double-edged, sword. It keeps us striving forward and, helps us evolve, and it's how we've become, what we are as a species today. And at the same time, it's also something that makes us vulnerable to, being preyed upon by people that maybe don't have our best interests at heart and are manipulative.
Yep.
And people want to belong, right? We want to be part of a group, and it's easy to manipulate that vulnerability and exploit it for monetary gain, or sexual issues, or power, all the above. I had a cousin whose girlfriend's sister was in a cult with a guru in the East Coast for years, and the person was saying one thing and doing another. He was having sex with his female devotees, and you know swearing them to secrecy, making them lie, and then coming across as some kind of celibate spiritual hero, as well as spending money that he shouldn't have, and for things that he shouldn't have been spending money on it. The whole drill. So eventually that came out after, I guess, several years, and the group disbanded. But it was really kind of tragic to watch what happened with, um, the woman that had been a cult member, my cousin's girlfriend's sister, because she had been sheltered in this environment for probably close to a decade, between her 20s and early 30s. And that's a really formative time in anybody's life. And to have, been lied to repeatedly about, something that you devoted so much of your life to, and have it turn out to be a fraud, um, it's dreadfully confusing. And uh, it took her years before she began to navigate, you know, the reality of life outside of the ashram that she'd been a part of, successfully.
I'm so sure. I mean, it's really such a betrayal, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it wasn't, a lot of these situations, they take responsibility and power away from people. Of course, the, you know, acceptable premise is that nobody takes anything from you that you don't give up. And they infantilize these people, make them dependent on them. And then, when it comes time for them to make their own life decisions after these things disband, where they separate themselves from them if they're lucky, uh, they're kind of crippled. They don't know how to make, simple decisions. Should I cross the street, or do I need to ask my guru? That kind of thing. So Um, I mean, fortunately, for me personally, I would never join a group that would have me as a member in the first place. So, the Groucho Marx saying. So I'm
How
inherently protected.
how about the I don't know if I'm going to say it right. The Renishis, the
Oh,
Renish.
Rajneesh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Because they were up in Oregon, right?
The Bhagwan. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes, they were. My dad actually went and visited them for a while. And I guess, full disclosure, my dad was in a cult too. Have you heard of Ramtha? You know what Ramtha is?
No.
Mm.
Uh-uh.
Have you seen the movie What the Bleep Do We Know?
Yes.
There's a woman in there named Jay-Z Knight, and she's all dressed in white, and she's a channeler. And the being that she channels is called Ramtha.
Ah,
So this was the thing. But yeah, so my dad, yeah, I don't know if he was cold shopping or if he was just checking stuff out, but he went up to Antelope, which is a city in eastern Oregon that the Rajneeshis took over, and hung out there for a while. And yeah, he liked it, but I don't think he joined or stayed. But yeah, yeah, there's a good multi-part documentary about that whole thing that came out a year or two ago, which is
yeah.
worth checking
Yeah,
out.
I saw that. I watched that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the Bhagwan, I think, probably had a pretty good message, but then he kind of ended up with an entourage that really liked being in control, and specifically one woman in particular named
Yeah.
Ma Nan Sheila.
Yeah.
And, they gradually started usurping power outside of the, uh, the property that they had purchased, and got involved politically. And there was a referendum that was coming up that was going to potentially drastically change the way that they were going to be able to govern themselves. And so Sheila and her innermost circle took it upon themselves to go around and um, I don't know if it was E. coli or some other kind of thing, but they dosed the salad bar at some of the local restaurants and other places with a contaminant, and they gave people food poisoning so that they'd be too sick to vote.
Yeah.
And she got caught and took off to Germany, and then they eventually extradited her, I guess, or I don't know what happened, but she got busted.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. It's it's very interesting. It's like some of the base philosophies about wanting people wanting to help people tap into their full potential, create communities, in provide spiritual awareness and then perhaps a path to enlightenment. All of these things are such beautiful ideas, and in some ways, some of the communities have been successful in putting together very healthy communities. But what do you suppose that is that corrupts them? You think it's greed or need for power or political power, or what do you think changes it? What do you think gets people off track?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's an incredibly rare combination of personality traits that uh, leads someone to want to be a spiritual healer or leader in the first place,
Yeah.
and also uh, really be selfless about it, and not have all the attendant base emotions, whatever you want to call them, needs desires show up at the same time. What I've seen in the research that I've done is that a lot of people, want to kind of take the shortest path to their spiritual development, and so they bypass dealing with all the family stuff and interpersonal stuff, traumas and everything else, and they kind of shoot straight to the crown chakra. Let's open up my third eye and take a bunch of things, and it's going to make me really enlightened, and then I'll be able to levitate or whatever their personal goals are.
Yeah.
And then they become aware and connected to all this spiritual knowledge, but they haven't grounded themselves in doing the harder work, which is to really look at what their personal limitations are and how they've hurt people and hurt themselves, all these things that the more gradually transformative self-help groups require you to process first,
Yeah.
right, before they give you any kind of access to power or really deeper teachings that can create lifetimes of karma. And
Hmm.
I think that's probably the biggest common error that people do is they don't do the work. They want the riches and the rewards without you know cleaning up the cesspool, um, and then all that baggage shows up to haunt them later when temptation shows up, or they feel insecure. I mean, without getting too political, look at the current person inside the White House. That person is just a molten mass of unresolved family tragedy,
Yeah.
and you know, uh, just juvenile to boot. And so that you're dealing with an almost an 80-year-old individual who has the emotional capacity of a toddler.
Yeah.
And the greatest power of the world. What a horrific combo, and we're seeing the results. So, you know,
Yeah.
and yet people apply. Oh, he's been appointed by God, so I'm going to bow
Right.
down to him. It's
Chosen,
like, okay,
chosen one. Yeah. Yeah.
right. So but the flip side of that coin, right, is the people that are attracted to that, right? The people that feel like they need somebody to guide them so much that they're willing to give up their individuality. Uh, a lot of the times these places require you to give everything,
Yes.
like
True.
Scientology, you have to give up all of your material wealth to the cult. Otherwise, you're suspicious, and you have to work for them, and be impoverished while you do it. So, so you can't have a leader without followers, and there's people that, for whatever reason, have a vulnerability or a blind spot, or just need to belong so badly that they're willing to subsume whatever ethics or morals or you know uh, lie detector that they have in order to get this thing, and they believe what they're being promised, and it's like a lot of things. Once you trust somebody and you give somebody you know your trust like that, it's very hard to backtrack, because then you've got to do the work of saying, wait a minute, I'm lying to myself, and I'm letting this person lie to me, and that's harming everything and making this whole relationship toxic, and climbing out of that without some kind of outside intervention is almost impossible for most
Yeah.
people. So
Yeah. It's very true. You know, at home here, I have cable TV, and
hmm
Scientology has a station on cable TV,
oh,
and
do they?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and I've never watched it, but I just find it, there's programming on there. I believe every day.
Yeah. Well, there must be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can only imagine. I forget what the terminology is. There's some terminology for people that are non-conforming that the Scientology folks use.
Hmm.
You're being aggressive, or I don't know, something like that, because they don't
Yeah.
believe in psychology. So, but
Yeah.
you have to get tested. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting, really. I don't know. I'm like you in the sense that I don't know what that's all about for people that feel like they need to give up everything in order to connect to, an organization or a community. I don't know if it's, you know, uh, actually, I was thinking about this earlier today. What I was about to say before I completely lose track of my thought
Uh-huh.
was, wondering, for many of these people, if what it is, they're looking for family, if they're looking for that sense of belonging is just so, if it's so strong or such a gaping emotional psychological wound, that they have that anytime they feel like they're being embraced by whomever, whatever, that they can gravitate towards that.
Mm-hmm.
And but so that was one of the thoughts. But then the other thing that I was thinking about, which is somewhat related, I suppose, in terms of doing self-reflection and trying to figure out, like where do you belong and what have you. For many, many, many years, I struggled with wondering where was home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where was home? And I moved a lot, a great deal, trying to find, I guess really what I was doing was trying to find a place and time where I could get comfortable, where I was comfortable. And but I struggled with that, and I would, and I still do it from time to time, but not not like I used to. I mean, when I would travel years ago, when I would travel, I would think, oh, I could live here in Seattle, or I I would go to Nevada, or I went to Texas, different places. Oh, maybe I could live here. Maybe this is it, And I would just like go through these mental gymnastics all the time, and I don't know when that changed. It was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But, the truth of it was that the things that I was looking for were always just inside.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as, finding that comfort and that grounding, it was always just inside. But it took a lot of work and a lot of discipline as well, to be able to find the ways, tap into the ways, where I could feel grounded and be comfortable in my own skin.
Mm-hmm.
That was the term.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now that's
Yeah.
where that took me.
Yeah. No, you said a lot there. I think that's really, you know, relevant. I do think people want to belong, and a lot of people come from less than ideal backgrounds, and it leaves them vulnerable to, you know, uh, people exploiting them by telling them that they finally found their home, they finally found where they want to belong.
Yeah.
And they get offered unconditional love at first, that, once
Right.
they're in and they bought into it, then it starts to get very conditional, right? And if you don't follow the rules that start getting laid down, then you're going to get cast out, which, no one wants that. So,
Right.
um, but, I think you also touched on, eventually figuring out that home wasn't necessarily a geographical location, it was a
Right.
physical place within yourself, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I think that's really true. You can have all the accoutrements that, people need to survive or even thrive physically and still not feel like you've got a sense of place if
Right.
if you're not right with yourself inside, you know.
Yeah.
So
It's so true. It's so true.
yeah, yeah. But I do think people, most people, not everybody, but most people want, um, to feel like they have a group, that they are a part of. And I think that's the other thing that happens with cults, is that they make you feel like there's something exclusive that you've joined that no one else, you know, but you and the people in the group really know about. And there's you know, sometimes it's a secrecy thing, but I think the other thing that gets promoted with that is just, the in group has the knowledge and has all this, power that comes with it and the wisdom and everything. And the people that are outside of it, they just, they don't know. I guess, in the Harry Potter world, they're called the Muggles or whatever,
Right.
the people that are, the unenlightened ones or whatever. You know, and then, your job either is to persevere in the face of that, or to go and enlighten them, or get some more, recruit, whatever it is. But, um, all that stuff is can be very appealing. It can make you feel like, you got a hold of the answers, and if you didn't
Yeah.
have direction, or your life, before that was not very satisfying, then, here's this menu of, this is what this means, and all you have to do is A, B, and C, and you'll feel the same way that the leader does too, and that, you'll know everything. And I don't know. I guess I'm just not, A, trusting enough, which, that has its own problems, and B, I'm just not interested. Like, I wouldn't say I'm cult proof, but I'm definitely, somewhat immunized. Especially, watching my dad go through his experience and that whole thing, which was interesting.
I'm so sure. I'm so sure. Well, it is, I've always found, psychology, sociology quite interesting. And, the kinds of things that I suppose help people and organizations define a variety of different things, everything from organizations to even reality on maybe a smaller level, but it is that belonging, it is behavior that is like duplicated within a community. It is language, certain language that is used repeatedly, and even sometimes slogans are also used. And these are all ways to kind of like keep people in a box, so to speak. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
always interesting. The military does that.
Hmm.
Think about, the Marines, the few, what, I don't know, what is it, few, the proud, the few, and I'm really reaching here, but there's certain slogans that they
Mm-hmm.
use, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it is about trying to build that community, that sense of belonging. And I think kind of what we've been talking about is that once you're in the middle of it, or deep in it, it's like, well, that becomes a truth
Mm-hmm.
and nothing else, you know, so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Alcoholics Anonymous is another organization that has been called a cult for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and it has all of the trappings, you know, of a cult in so many ways. You know, if you decide to stop going to meetings, you know, you're not excluded permanently from the group or shamed. You may be shamed. You may be shamed, but you know, no one is going to necessarily track you down and try to strong arm you to bring you back or anything like that. You don't have to give up your personal belongings, but you do have to change according to, you know, the way that Alcoholics Anonymous suggest.
Mm-hmm.
And that is pretty interesting. It's
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you know, that group that I mentioned at the top of the show, the mastery and transformational training that rose from the detritus of LifeSpring. The person that founded the original LifeSpring went through, um, you know, a military style breakdown
Ah,
kind of boot camp training. You know, where you know the intention behind that. You know, if you've ever been in the military, seen movies that are about it, is you know they erase your individualism and replace it with groupthink. So you're part of a hive,
yeah.
and you know they break you down and build you up. But you know, the military has a whole apparatus surrounding that, right? It's not just people in a room shouting at you or you know calling out what they see as your deficiencies, and then you know demanding that if you want to go further, you need to invest another several $100s or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and they, you know, even with all the surrounding infrastructure the military has, people flame out of that situation all the time for one reason or another, sometimes tragically so. But you know, and this is part of what the author wrote about in their expose about the MITT, the Mastery and Transformational Training, was that uh, they were being um, you know, broken down by people who had ulterior motives. You know, they had some people in the group that eventually person found out they were volunteers who'd gone through the training already and who were pressed back into service, not getting paid, but being there because they were kind of forced to come back and support the process.
Wow.
Uh, you know, and part of supporting the process is not just you know engaging in the breaking down of people, but also exhorting them to invest in the next level and the next level, you know, more money and more money. And, uh, you know, that was one of the takeaways a person had, was that, you know, there wasn't this sense of sincerity about it after a while, you know, even though the students taking the classes might have come to it with sincerity, the framework and how it was being presented to them was really about getting them into the next stage of this process so that they could make money off of them. You know, and you know, there's nothing wrong per se with you know having a transformational group that has a profit motive, but if you're putting that profit motive so far above people's well-being, uh, that they come away feeling like you know they're just a wallet to this
Right.
organization, then you've got your priorities really backwards.
Yeah, it's
Um,
true.
and you have people in there that are not really there of their own free will. They're there because they've been shanghaied, so to speak, to work for free for the company. I mean, it doesn't say good things about your group. And unfortunately, it's like a lot of stuff, the best kind of propaganda always has some truth in it, right? So a lot of these self-help groups, people sometimes do come away feeling like, wow, that was really incredibly transformative, totally worth it. I got all this out of it. Or even if it wasn't 100% their bag, they still, were able to address some issues that maybe they weren't getting any headway on, in any other, process. But it doesn't excuse the fact that, you start entering into some very challenging territory when you require people to expose things about themselves that maybe they've never told anybody else. And these are a bunch of strangers, and nobody in there has any training except what the group has provided them. You know,
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
it just seems like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Well, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, Synanon, I don't, I don't know if it was, if the, if the original intent of Synanon was to help the person coming out of prisons. Uh, but I do know that in some of the substance abuse treatment centers that copied that modality and techniques, oftentimes it was used for the individual trying to acclimate back to society, having been incarcerated for a lot of years, and
Hmm.
it's just very, very interesting, very, very interesting, and I guess
Yeah.
it fits. It fits. I guess it's possible if a person has a lot of unresolved trauma issues and then that line between what is abuse and what is love for people with those kinds of emotional wounds and psychological wounds, it becomes very blurred.
Hmm.
you know
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like love is not supposed to hurt.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, don't we all wish that was the case? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, you bring up really great points of discussion. Um, yeah, sometime we should do a show on the incarceration system and spirituality. That would be a fascinating topic.
Oh.
But yeah, I think that was a part of it. There were people that were unable to find work, uh, maybe from their addiction or maybe from not being able to. They had a record of some kind, and Synanon took them in, fed them, gave them a roof over their heads, gave them a purpose. All really great things. I guess the premise of all these groups is that um, you know uh, there's the populations that they target that are the most amenable to their message are people that have less than ideal situations going on, right?
Yeah.
There's people that um, have issues that you know in general society is going to look at and go, there's something wrong with this person. And um, we're still a very punitive society. Um, we've got, to me, we've got a very big schism uh, between people that feel like people need second chances and they need help and they need support and they need love and constructive um, input, and people that just feel like, oh, you made a mistake, you need to be punished and have a scarlet letter tattooed on your forehead for the rest of your life. And
Right.
you know uh, and we've got this incredibly sprawling and about to get even larger prison system that a lot of it is now for profit, that you know I mean, not to mention people that were just shipping out of the country to basically a concentration camp. So
Yeah.
and people like that. We got capital punishments on the rise again, all sorts of fun stuff. It's just like,
Jeez.
I don't get it. But some people feel like if you don't have some form of punishment waiting for people to receive in the wings, then it doesn't matter how um, constructive your approach is going to be to the person that by society standards has done something wrong. You know you're setting that person up to fail because they don't have a backstop that's going to incentivize them to change their behavior. And there is some truth to that to some extent, but it shouldn't be like the first thing that we offer people when they screw up.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's so true. So
100%
true.
of the time.
Yeah.
You know.
It's interesting, and again, it makes me think about, family of origin issues, the
Hmm.
people experiences in unhealthy, abusive households. And there can be an awful lot of confusion about what you believe, being treated well equates to. I can think about myself when I was much younger. If in any kind of relationship, if there wasn't chaos and drama involved in it, then something had to be wrong.
Hmm. Hmm.
Something had to be wrong. It was
Hmm.
like, because it didn't match. It wasn't matching my internal, oh, I don't know what the word is I want to use, my internal guidance system,
Hmm.
for lack of another way of putting it. But it didn't
Hmm.
match. And
Hmm.
so, if I was with, when I was younger, if I was with someone that treated me well and respectful and polite and generous and this and that and what have you, I would usually find that person boring.
uh, right.
Oh,
Right.
God, boring. So let me sabotage it. Let me stir something up here,
Mm.
and find fault. And you find fault with me, and here we go.
Right.
And then now we got something real. This is real.
Hmm.
And but that's what, we run off of those internal patterns, those internal belief systems until we know, hopefully different.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we pass on behaviors that were taught to us,
Yeah.
by our parents, and you know, so many people grow up uh, with a toxic understanding of what love is. That I mean, I totally relate to your story where it's like, if you love me, why aren't you being abusive to me? And if you're
Yeah.
not being abusive to me, then I'm going to do something to force you to be abusive to me
Yeah.
because that's what I learned love was when I was growing up because I
Yeah.
was abused.
Yeah.
and so it goes, and yeah, it takes a lot of um, courage and um, initiative, and also, unfortunately, probably more than a little luck for people to, first of all, not be in denial, right? In that stage where they're like, no, I grew up just fine. There's not a problem,
Right.
and then recognize, um, for me, that was a difficult thing because it felt like betrayal, right? When I started admitting that, my parents were uh, more than a little bit fallible and really didn't know what the hell they were doing. They had me when they were 20, and you know, and they didn't get, you know, 100% best parenting from their parents either, for a variety of reasons, and they had their own tragedies that they had to deal with growing
Oh,
up,
sure. Yeah.
colored their idea, So, uh, but I think if you are fortunate enough to come to an understanding that love is really important, and that self-love is really the barometer by which any other kind of love that you're able to receive or give is going to be measured by, that you figure out a way to unlock whatever your personal formula is going to be, to understand and um, work to find ways to uh, allow that kind of love to really be your guiding light with your decisions. Ideally, every decision you make, but um, at least the major ones. Um, you know, and there's no shame in admitting that you don't know, what the answers are. You may not know what love is, or you're confused or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's started to change in the last decade or two. Fortunately, um, then comes the really difficult decision making process of, okay, I recognize that I need to do some work here. Now where do I go to find the answers, right? And that kind of, to me, brings us back to the whole cult thing, where it's like, well, I've got the answers over here. You just pay $3,000 and go to this weekend long seminar, and I'm going to give you all the answers in a nice little box, and then you can become part of my group, and you'll feel loved and nurtured, and everything's going to be better, right? You know? It's like, yeah, okay. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you have to be careful who you're willing to be vulnerable with.
That's very true. It's very true. Yeah. I um I do think that on many levels, the healing process from a lot of these kinds of issues can and do the healing can happen relatively, and that's kind of a vague term, really hard to say just what that means, but
Hmm.
it can and it does happen on occasion with some speed, especially when it pertains, this is what been my observation and my experience is when because we started talking, when we first started talking, we were talking about, the human potential organizations and what have you. And so I was thinking about being able to tap into our own human potential. And what I have found and observed is that indeed, a lot of times people have done the work, have done emotional work, sometimes some very deep emotional work, and that has taken certainly a fair amount of time, and yet from an intellectual or mental standpoint, they find themselves still, thinking the same things, still like repeating certain beliefs and what have you. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of that really can change pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I think if one is able to find, the right guidance, the right mentor, the right friend, the right professional, and really learn some of the techniques involved in what I would call almost like rewiring,
Mm-hmm.
your thought process. Yeah, I mean, I've seen some changes that happen pretty quickly with people.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful, because then that allows a person to tap into, their potential. That allows them to tap into that creative side that has been just begging to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Or the opposite is true. And I just remembered something, which it was kind of hilarious way back when, and now it's just kind of interesting. I remember talking to a man that had been sober, clean and sober for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And but to look at him, you would not have necessarily thought he was clean, because he had very long hair, and he dressed, I don't want to say like a hippie,
Oh, heavens, no! Don't say
yeah.
that.
I don't even know what a hippie is, right?
Who does anymore?
But nevertheless, to look at him, he looked like he had maybe been out on the street for quite some time. But anyhow, to talk to him, he was actually very bright, well spoken, and he would just take delight in pulling out a photograph of himself in the middle of his addiction. And the photo was him, certainly, but he had a suit and a tie on,
Mm-hmm.
short hair, groomed, and everything about his physical appearance was, like I said, very well groomed. He looked like he had it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was only after he got sober and clean, and had been clean and sober for quite some time, that he found the freedom, to express himself differently in his
Mm-hmm.
appearance, in his dress, in what he did for a living. And so you never know. You never
Yeah.
know until you really, like, step into it, and take a look at what the blocks are, and, what are your beliefs about, you know, your human potential.
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. A couple quick things come to mind about that. Are you familiar with the comic Mad Magazine? Do you know
Oh,
about
yeah.
Mad?
Oh, yeah.
So they had a whole section on drugs, and there were these two older ladies, and they were giving this one kid a hard time. Why can't you do more with yourself? Why are you using drugs? Why can't you be more like this guy? And they were pointing to this really well dressed, person in a three-piece suit on the end of the corner, and conform to what people's ideal of appearance look like. And they're like, yeah, why can't you be like him? What do you do? And he's like, well, I'm the guy that deals drugs to your kids. So,
Yeah.
you uh, appearances are like that. The other thing I was going to say is when I was traveling in Europe uh, many decades ago, I was in Madrid in Spain, and sitting in a public square, and I watched these two guys in business suits, very clean cut, come into the park. It was around lunchtime, 12, 1 o'clock, and they climbed up into this pavilion structure that had a roof over it, and they reached up really high, and they pulled the stuff down, and they both took off their coats and rolled their sleeves up, and they shot up, and that
Oh,
was their heroin
man.
production. They did it right there, like right in pub, like just like, you know what, this is what we're doing, shooting alley right here. And
Wow.
I was like, holy smokes, you know.
Wow.
So, and then they probably went back to their 9 to 5 jobs,
Yeah.
and that was how they got through the day. So,
Yeah.
um, we still have a lot to learn about what motivates people to change in directions that are healthy and less harmful.
So true.
Um, but I think that the base of it, you have to come from an authentic place of caring about people. It can't be just that they're commodities for you to, you know, fill up your coffers with. Well, anyway, we are past the end of the
Oh,
show,
my.
so um, we need to get started with that
All
situation.
right.
Speaking of transitions, so let's get that going. Do let's go play. Maybe. Well, the outro isn't cooperating. All right, Adrian. Well, maybe you should let people know how they can get in touch with you if they want to connect with your many, many talents. So,
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. Thank you, Lawrence. One of the best ways to learn more about what I do is to go to my website, which is ravenmessages.com. You can also find me on Facebook as well, Raven Messages. And you'll see all kinds of things, including a new page I want to make mention of really quick. New page where I'm selling some wonderful and high grade gemstone jewelry, and that's Raven Messages Jewelry. That's the page. But regarding my readings, yeah, I do Zoom, I do phone calls, see people in person. And you can call me at 714-376-7289. How about you, Lawrence?
very nice, very nice. Yes. Yeah. Uh, well, you can contact me with a phone call or a text at 541-344-7534. I do psychic work, I do shamanic work. I'm also a trained, certified clinical herbalist. Uh, my business is Giving Tree Farm Herb Company, so you can visit my website, givingtreefarm.com. Lots of different ways to get in touch with me. Givingtree@earthlink.net is my email. So, whatever works for you.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, this has been another very relevant and very potent discussion. I'm
Yep.
so glad we could share the time together, my friend, going over this. And shout out to people that showed up for the show. I know Cassie was here watching us, and we had a gentleman for a while who showed up, wanted to ask a question, and then disappeared on us. So
Ah,
next time,
yeah.
Cassie gets the first dib next time at the show,
Yeah.
I think. So
Hi, Cassie.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna let you take us out, Adrian.
All right. Well,
So,
again, thank you. Thank you, Lawrence. And the viewers that, are tuning in, supporting us, really appreciate it. And, take good care of yourself. It's kind of crazy out there right now, but things are going to change and we're gonna get through it. So, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Very
Stay
good.
well.
All right. All right, everybody. Well, have a great weekend. Thanks for watching the show. We'll be here next week, same time, Friday, 6 p.m. See you then. Too much, Adrian.
Bye. Bye.